Okay, I'll hand over to. Okay, so we'll now do a Q&A. And I did two separate but connected presentations today, but I will try to answer um, any other questions that you may have about studies that I've done in the past or anything that you have. So over to you.
Hello,
Hi.
I'm Rasa. You know,
Yes.
uh, look, it's interesting, like how you explained the fifth, eighth, the sixth, and uh, the seventh,
Mhm.
especially trying to show that the sixth is not actually part of the the beast. Uh, uh, as that the beast, the persecuting power.
Mhm.
Would you mind uh, 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 repeating the points clearly?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
So you just described the beast as a persecuting power. So if we just take that at as fact that the beast is a persecuting power, it's a persecuting entity. In Revelation 17, we're going to be told about the beast and the person that's riding it. I just want to open up my eSword over here. So John is going to get an explanation about this beast that the kings have, um, or more clearly, there's two entities, a great prostitute and a beast. And John is going to explain to him the fact that there's this great whore that's going to sit on many waters. The kings of the earth are going to commit fornication with this great whore. But he's going to get an understanding of the beast and the woman. So in verse 7, the angel's going to say to John, let's consider everything that you've seen. I'm going to show you about the whore that we have and the beast. Are two separate entities, and I'm going to show you something about both of them, about this church and this army, what we would call the king of the north, the state entity. Um, and so the key distinction that I wanted to make when going through that is to show how there's 3 points in time in respect to where John is standing. There's the past, the present, and the future. So if we isolate those verses and go through them like step by step, in my perspective, you can see how they're different things. So verse 8, in talking about the beast that you saw was. The beast that you saw is not in the present, but it's going to ascend in the future. At some point, it's going to be resurrected. This is about the beast. That's what is being spoken about. And then in verse 10, in verse 9, Job's going to be told, now the heads that you see on the beast follow a different pattern. There's going to be dead. So at this point, it's alive while the beast is dead. And then there's one that's going to um, come in the future, the seventh, not yet. So I'm just to make it more clearly to come. So in going through this compare and contrast between the two, if if the head equals the beast, and if the beast dies, is killed, then the head wouldn't be alive. Just think of the natural. If you kill off my body, you can't have an alive head. The head is dead. So my point is in showing that the sixth is alive and while the beast is dead, is to show that the head is not the beast. It's not a representation of the beast. The sixth head, they're not interchangeable because while it is alive, the beast is dead, and while the beast is dead, it is alive. That's our middle column over here. That's my first proof that the sixth kingdom is not the king of the north. My second one is showing how the sixth kingdom is equal to the glorious land. The glorious land in the natural was ancient Israel. In the past, we've, in fact, not even in our vows, it points out how Adventism never was, never is, and never will be Babylon. It never becomes Babylon. Despite its failings, despite how bad it looks, it never becomes Babylon. In the natural, ancient Israel never became Babylon. They may have adopted idolatry, they may have gone into captivity, they may have drunk from the wine of the cup, but ancient Israel never became Babylon. Babylon being the king of the north, because that's who comes against Judah. It's Nebuchadnezzar as the king of the north coming to take those Israelite captives and then destroy Jerusalem. So the glorious land, in the context of the church, never becomes Babylon. So in the context of the state, the glorious land, the USA, should follow a similar dynamic, that it never becomes Babylon. It never becomes the king of the north, just like Adventism never becomes the king of the north. despite its failings. So those, in my mind, are my two proofs, at least, to try and demonstrate and articulate that the Sixth Kingdom is not the King of the North. And that was all to distinguish between the sin of the sixth and the sin of the seventh being different, whatever those sins are. I call it, and in case other people might have called it, state nationalism, and this one, covenant forgetfulness. The covenant, which was essentially to protect the people, to be a defender and protector of the people. Adventism, that covenant was with regards to the church. It was meant to protect and defend the people in the church, the truth. And the Sixth Kingdom, USA, was meant to defend and protect the people in the nation as a whole. They had two different job functions. Um, so yeah, I don't, does did that this was this bit a bit more clear, Russell?
Okay. Thank you. So you correct me if I'm wrong. This is
Hmm.
interesting. And from what you have demonstrated and said, what I can see during like the is not.
Hmm.
Yeah. What I can see from your board work, they're actually two heads. It's only that the other one is not. I don't know if I'm wrong. Then there's
Say that again, sorry.
okay. What I'm saying is there is the was, is not, and ascend.
That's the
Yeah.
beast, yes.
Yes, that's the beast. So so we can see that the beast which was is
Hmm.
connected to the we can say the fifth head.
The five that are
Then
fallen. Yeah.
yes, yes.
Hmm.
Then the beast which is not, meaning during this time the beast is not connected to the sixth head.
Yes.
And the Bible continues that the seventh will come, and this seventh it shall be connected with the beast. Yeah,
Yes.
it uses the language that it shall rule with the beast,
Hmm.
something like that. So and that in itself makes the sixth different from the five which are fallen
Hmm.
and the seven. It has
Yes.
got no connection with the beast. Yeah.
Yes.
And it helps me also like to, because I had this problem when I look at Revelation 17, it helps me to see that during the sixth, the beast is, is not, meaning it's dead. Yeah, and the sixth head like who exists. So the sixth head must be something good because it's not connected with uh,
The beast.
the beast. And John, though is limited, but I think he did the best because he's saying that the beast is not there, and but he
Hmm.
wants us to see that there is actually someone who
Yes.
is in
There's
this time
something that's
period.
alive.
Yes, and also at the same time, he wants to distinguish what is alive from these
Hmm.
other the seventh and the other five which are fallen. I think it's clear. It makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. I like the way you articulated it. There's a specific lesson that one is trying to teach. And for me, I don't think the lesson is that this head is on the beast, so it's part of Satan's kingdom. There's a there's a he's juxtaposing two entities, the sixth and the sixth kingdom and the beast, and all the other kingdoms that represent the beast. and he's juxtaposing them, bringing them together. So if you think of what juxtaposition is, it's going to force two things that do not belong together together. And the way he's going to force them together is by putting the head on the beast. So here's all the different heads, and here's your beast. So juxtaposition says force these things that don't normally come together to put them together. So he's going to force it together by making that head on the beast. But in that juxtaposition, the point is to show the differences between the two, to show the distinction between the two. And what you've just described here is this time period over here where the beast is dead, the sixth is alive. So in reality, because I kept getting asked this question and I didn't have a good enough answer um, as to if the sixth kingdom is a good kingdom, why is it on the beast? And in my mind, I think that John is doing this deliberately so that we can better see the contrast between the two. It's classic juxtaposition. Force things together. So this good thing is being forced onto the body of a bad thing, not to show that they're the same, but to show that they're different. And so he goes through verse 10 and etc. to do that contrast. So yeah, I like the way you described it, and I think juxtapositioning is the answer to why that head is on the beast. So yeah, I don't know if there's any other questions. If not, then we could finish early, but I will leave it up to Russell's discretion.
Uh, okay, if there is any person with a question, you can go ahead. And if there is none, maybe after 30 seconds, we can see the way forward.
Hello?
Yes,
I
Joseph, you can go ahead, move close to the mic.
Yeah, can you hear me clearly now?
Yeah.
Uh, I just want to ask KTC, uh, just want to get some clarifications, especially on the marker or the beginning of the waymark of Sunday law. In connection to what we are learning, especially in Liberation 13 and 17. What can we get from these chapters we have read to mark the resurrection of the beast, or the setting up of the image and the speaking of the image, and in relation to 18th July, because you just mentioned that in the beginning, you said we are, at least we are more settled on that one, but I wanted more clarity in what we have learned just now. How do we get the information, these best chapters, in relation to the beginning of the waymark of the sandal?
so in our studies of the Sunday law, there's various aspects that you can take. You could do a study on when is the Sunday law, which would be the date, um, and that serves a purpose because it will tell you when does it start. I mean, with that date, you could say, okay, what does that date teach you? What do the events of that date teach you? So it could be just bringing up the different perspectives. It could be the RNC, the election, um, the I think what was the inauguration? Inauguration. Those are the three options, at least in people's minds. So, what does this have to do with the win of the Sunday law or the election or this? Like, what are the characteristics there? And then there's a third thing, which I chose to explore in my studies today, which was let's understand the seventh kingdom and the sixth kingdom more specifically, because it's related to this. So, if I can frame today's studies as sin of six versus sin of seven, from my perspective, this doesn't answer question number one. Today's study doesn't answer question number one, and it was never intended to do so. It kind of doesn't even really answer question number two. However, what I think this study does answer, for me at least, is when we start to consider there's two things, and this will become clearer in the future in my studies. There's a sin and there's a punishment. What is that punishment and who gives that punishment? So, if we think of the sin of the sixth kingdom, we need to ask ourselves who is punishing the sixth? Like, who's God going to use to punish the sixth kingdom? And if we think of the seventh, again, who is God going to use to bring judgment against the seventh kingdom? So, knowing what their sins are as distinguishable sins, I think can help us understand who and what this punishment is, as various studies are going to develop to try and demonstrate. So, to put it frankly, I don't think today's study, not I don't think, it wasn't intended to answer the July 18 question or November 5 or January 20th. Instead, it was meant to try and put in place the to put to have us clearly know who we're talking about when we talk about these kingdoms. Um, my long and short of it is it doesn't answer the question you're asking. If you want an answer to the question you're asking, I'd have to describe something different. Um, yeah. So if you want to ask a different question, you can ask that question. But in essence, this doesn't answer anything about July 17. I mean, July 18. It serves a different purpose. Does that help? It doesn't help, but does it help? Who had asked that question?
It's Joseph.
Yes. So my answer to your question is it doesn't answer the question you asked. But if you'd like me to answer a question, then I could um, try and give my proofs more simply as to July 17. I mean, July 18. Why do I keep saying 17? Oh, because we've been talking about Revelation 17 the whole morning. Um,
Yeah, I've gotten you. It's when that I've understood what you have said.
Mhm,
Uh, but again, you talked about the mega. Where do
mhm.
you get that? Yeah, you brought it in connection to what we are learning in liberation. That's why now I brought that question where we can look into
Mhm.
those things like the when and what. Yeah. I mean, even the ascension of
Yeah.
the beast from the bottomless. Yeah.
The reason why I feel like it's disjointed from the when is because someone could take the study and see and say it's demonstrated in July, or it's demonstrated in November when people vote, or it's demonstrated in July. I mean, in January when Trump gets in. This is applicable to wherever you're going to point to in those things. You see MAGA in July, you see MAGA in January, you see MAGA being voted in November. Um, the thing about MAGA was for us to conceptualize what MAGA is really. And in my mind, MAGA is this fusion of the American identity with the state itself. So that was presentation number one. It's this demonstration of what this resurrected, more glorious King of the North looks like. So that's why I say it's not really trying to answer the question of when, because a person could make the argument that you see this at any one of those dates in July, in November, or January. Um, the key point was the what. So it's not the church telling the state what to do. It's Trump as king and God that is going to guide America in a specific direction. Um, we call it state nationalism to make America the greatest again. Um, so, yeah, if we were to point to July, at least in my mind, I said that the sixth kingdom and the seventh kingdom, I may be corrected in the future, but I don't see it as a clean cut between Democrats and Republicans. The arguments that I've given for the Sunday law being in July are the role that the establishment plays in thinking about the Sixth Kingdom. So in 1798, we have a new nation rising, and in that constitution, it's going to be legalized. It's going to take the Declaration of Independence and package it into this codified system of laws and etc. You cannot have the Sixth Kingdom without these laws, or else it ends up just being a rebellious nation against tyranny, which in and of itself is it's a libertarian argument. It's this fight for liberty. That's what that whole Declaration of Independence is about. That's what that whole um, American Revolution is about with Great Britain. It's this libertarian driver. But if you don't have the constitution that follows, which I spoke about as institutionalizing that spirit, that ideology, then it just ends up being continual rebellion. And that's where you get populists come up. Populists are just people with a libertarian mindset who want change, whether it's Julius Caesar in 63 BC or it's Donald Trump standing up in 2016 and today. He's a populist guided by this libertarian ideology to fight against the system. So in 1798, where you have these two kingdoms, the dragon is going to follow the woman into um, this haven, the USA. You have the seventh and the sixth. From my perspective, the sixth is best articulated or best seen in their decision, in the sixth decision to institutionalize that libertarian fight, that libertarian ambition. And so today, when you get to today, and Donald Trump and the new Republicans are going to dismantle this system that was meant to protect that libertarian fight and divorce the libertarian ideology from the system by calling the system a swamp, the establishment is going to come under attack. And the establishment, I'm suggesting, has two faces. It has two roles. Number one is the progressive state, which, to put it simply, you can see in the Democrats, progressive state. And it has another. Keep the king of the north at bay. Keep the seventh kingdom from resurrecting. Keep the seventh kingdom dead. That's the establishment. Hence why the Tea Party movement that rises up in 2012 takes pop shots at Obama, because on the left, you have the progressive state. On your political spectrum, if you call this the center, you have your people like Obama, Clinton, etc. This is your center left. And then you have people like, now I'm forgetting their names. I'll put McConnell here as well. Mitch McConnell he's an establishment politician. I know that we point to him as, this evil man who's done a lot, but he's really an establishment politician. Hence why he doesn't like Trump. And then you have Trump here on the far right. There's someone specific. McCain. McCain was a Republican who sits on the center right. And there's various others. Romney. Yeah, Romney. That's a good one. So these are your establishment Republicans on the right. So this fight that the far right is going to come with, your Bannons, your Trumps, your Sessions, and etc. The list goes on. Musk, can put him there. This fight is going to be against this establishment. It's not really a fight against Bernie Sanders and everything that Bernie Sanders stands for, because Bernie Sanders is also fighting the establishment, this populist movement that's rising up on the left, because there's this belief that the establishment doesn't do enough. But this establishment is put in place to protect the Sixth Kingdom, to ensure a progressive state, as well as to keep the Seventh Kingdom dead, to keep the Seventh Kingdom in the grave, where it's in the bottomless pit. So in 2012, after Obama, passes all that legislation to create a welfare state and etc., the Tea Party are going to attack Obama. They're going to call him out, but they realize that they can't get much headway there. And so they start attacking the center right. And the center right are initially going to try to resist the Tea Party, but over time they end up getting swamped out, drained out. And so that's that story about the purging of the Republican Party. It's about this libertarian movement that feels that this establishment has become a monarchy, has become a king. Libertarian. So my studies have framed this as conservative compromise, not my studies today, but in studies past, as these are the gatekeepers of democracy, your center right. The reason why is because they are best suited to deal with this problem on the far right with your libertarians. They cannot, because populists appeal to the people. And so the easiest way to get a populist in is through pure democracy. It's through democracy, because a populist keep a dictator out. What do you need to control? This center right needs to various places you see how it's this continual fight between the far right and the center right. And these right end up being the gatekeepers of democracy. They serve a purpose wider than just their own internal party politics. They serve a purpose at maintaining this establishment as a whole. They do a job, and the left do a job in ensuring this progressive the people. So, from my perspective, the sixth kingdom is this. It's your center right and your center left, both doing different jobs to ensure that the king of the north doesn't come back. So, coming to today's study and the sins of the kingdoms, why I want to articulate that and put it into place, and perhaps one could argue now, I suppose, as it being a proof of this, is because if we see how the seventh kingdom gets overtaken by state nationalism, this kingdom being over here, then the events of July, not the day of July 18, but what took place at that RNC, the crowning of the Republican Party as being overtaken by MAGA, this Make America the Greatest Again, or Make America Great Again, then that becomes an indication that we're living in the time period of the seventh kingdom, because this forms part of the sixth kingdom. And when this is purged, then the sixth kingdom is now being punished. So yeah, maybe that's a better answer for you. Did that make sense, Josie?
Yes, thank you so much. Make a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
Munametsi?
Hi, Ketis. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Yeah, no, your study was quite elaborative and quite clear in many of its aspects. So you talked about SDA not being Babylon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I understand that. And maybe I think to add to your points, even Ellen G. White, I think she points to two things that makes the other churches Babylon. I think she points to Sunday observance as one of them. And then she points to the iniquitous connections with the state churches as the other thing that makes Babylon Babylon. So SDA does not have any of those two things. I think she talks about many other things, but I think those were the key things. But now you've just identified, so the seventh kingdom, in your opinion, now we are back at Babylon, right, in the seventh kingdom. But the sixth is not Babylon, but the seventh now becomes Babylon. The seventh kingdom, so that now the principles of the seventh kingdom Do you see SDA being swept by what will be happening in the seventh kingdom? Like getting under the umbrella, so to speak, of the philosophy, the ideology of the seventh kingdom. And if you see SDA being swept by that, how do you now, will at that stage SDA continue not to be Babylon? Because if the seventh kingdom is Babylon and SDA gets swept by the ideology and the principles of the seventh kingdom, how does it not then become part of Babylon or itself even Babylon? I mean, how do you deal with that? I'm not sure if you get my
Yeah,
question.
I think I understand it. So the one thing that I can point to, because there's a principle that we have in Bible prophecy, which we're all aware of, which is line upon line. It's Solomon saying there's nothing new under the sun. We live in a repetitive cycle. So for me, that's my first point of reference with regards to understanding anything today. Does it have a precedence in the past? If there's no precedence, then I know that what I might think might be the case today can't be, because there's no precedence for it. So I took us back to ancient Israel. And I took us back to the glorious land. In the glorious land, all the principles that made Babylon Babylon were idolatry, were, we'll just say, rejection of the Sabbath, were um, the various things that made Babylon Babylon. But when Judah goes into captivity to Babylon, and you have all the Israelites um, start worshipping idols. They start taking on Babylonian customs. They start drinking of the wine of Babylon. They come out of that with a remnant. So Daniel refuses to eat at the king's table, um, and Israel effectively never becomes the thing that they go into captivity of. So that's my line. That's my history. That's my precedent. Again, Christ, the Jews, the Pharisees, they never end up becoming Rome. They may fall to Roman practices and etc., but they don't become Rome. It's the specific Christian church at the beginning that Paul is talking about, not talking about during the 1260 and etc. In essence, so when we come to today and we see how Adventism has drunk of the wine of Babylon, has taken into its supper what we'll just frame as patriarchy, to encompass the various things that you spoke about. It can take on that doctrine, but it doesn't make it the thing that takes it into captivity, if that makes sense. So just like ancient Israel, while they may have performed the practices of Babylon, they still remained Israelites. They were never Babylonians. They never became Babylon. So now the antitype or the spiritual application would be Adventism. Despite believing in different Babylonian doctrines of the King of the North, we'll frame it under patriarchy, it never changes its name. It never changes who it is as Adventism. So it never becomes Babylon. And there's a remnant that gets pulled from the church. Each and every time, there's a remnant that is reflective of Adventism to show that while there's some people who do some bad things, there's a remnant that's going to be called out who's going to reflect my church. In ancient Israel, that happened. But my point is that in that time period of captivity, from when Nebuchadnezzar takes him captive to when Artaxerxes sends them back home, or Cyrus, sorry, from when Cyrus starts that um, call for them to go back home, the Israelites stood as a separate and distinct kingdom who may have taken on Babylonian customs and teachings, but they were still a separate entity. So today, I'm suggesting it's the same dynamic with respect to Adventism, the church side, and with respect to the sixth kingdom, the state side. Does that I answer you?
Yeah, no, I think I get you. But so you've just talked about the sixth kingdom and SDA, right?
Hmm.
But with respect to the seventh kingdom and SDA, so but anyway, I think I got a logic anyway. Let me not go in there. The last
Okay.
thing that I want was uh, the Republican right or center right being the gatekeepers.
Hmm.
So if they're the gatekeepers of democracy, as you say, but as we pointed out also, they had a sin that they committed, the sin that allowed the far right to then now come in and and take left.
Sorry, you broke up for a bit. I didn't hear that last bit.
Uh, so the center right and the center left.
Hmm.
That simply means they were not quite good gatekeepers, were they? Because I mean, they committed something that allowed the compromised some of the sin that they committed, allowed the far right to come in.
Hmm.
So that simply means even though they were set up as gatekeepers, they were not that good gatekeepers, were they? That's why the far right had to. I think that's the whole point of your study, right?
Yeah, that I think for a big part of the USA's history, this center right were really good gatekeepers. There were several populists who tried running throughout the USA's lifetime. I'm forgetting their names, but a big one that rose up in 1992 and then tried running in 96, Pat Buchanan. And then another one. They essentially tried running for on the Republican ticket, and Republicans, interestingly enough, endorsed a Democrat president, a Democrat nominee, I think it was for senator, to make sure that that far right person doesn't come in. So even up till 1996, they were gatekeepers in a strong way. Um, but then as time went on, because of the expediency of wanting to win, um, the Republican Party started failing in its job as a gatekeeper. So the center, I think there's two different roles that they play in the Sixth Kingdom. The right, gatekeepers, the left, this progressive state. And that's what makes the establishment. Keep out dictators and progress the nation, um, grow with our human rights. So, yeah, they became lazy, essentially, the left. They forgot their job function. And here, they also forgot their job function to keep out dictators. Um, so, at one point, I think they both did a good job, but then time moves on and they stop doing their job function, both of them. And so the Sixth Kingdom ends up being scourged. I don't think I said anything differently to how you described it.
Yeah, no. I guess thanks for the study. It was a good study in my opinion.
Thank you. I think you can pray, Curtis.
Okay, let's pray to close. Dear God, thank you for each and every opportunity you give us to grow in our understanding of the great controversy. We are each limited the in what we can do, but we know that as a collective we can grow. Where two or three are gathered, we know that you're there, and we know that it is your will that the truth shines brighter. And so I thank you that it is more than just one. It's two or three that are gathered in your name. I pray and ask that we may do the work that you have raised us up to do. And I thank you for the opportunity to do that work, because it's in doing that work that we ourselves can grow as a movement, as an institution, and as individual people. I praise you always in Jesus' name. Amen.